Number 8. This one's kind of cheating for two reasons. First of all, it's not a villain. It's a pair of villains that absolutely can't be separated. For another, the book is by Neil Gaiman, and I'm going to use another better and more well-known villain from another book by Neil Gaiman later on down the list. However, much like our Volturi, I couldn't leave these guys off. I absolutely couldn't. Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandemar, the dynamic duo from Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This is actually the book on the list that I read the most recently. Croup and Vandemar, well, if you know the book, actually are not the main villains. There is a villain who's the big bad and commands them, and is given somewhat character depth. But when it comes to antagonists, working antagonism in this story, these two really just steal the show. They're presented as an archetype of your standard big guy, little guy, described in prose as a fox and a wolf. Vandemar is the big dumb guy, and Croup is the little smart guy with the motor mouth. And they pretty much play these archetypes as you'd expect. But it's done in one of the most creepy ways possible. Everything that surrounds them is creepy. They have their lair in an abandoned hospital. The way they carry out their murders is absolutely bone-chilling, and murder is their specialty. And it's been implied that they're in fact somewhat immortal, as they've been responsible for some of the great tragedies throughout history. Their bond is also an interesting one. You're never quite sure, really, if they get on well, as evidenced by the final act of their appearance in the book, which I am absolutely not going to spoil, but I will say proves that they are absolutely inseparable as a duo. Which means, of course, I can't split them up on the list. But they also play mean little pranks on each other that involves tricking each other into things like self-mutilation. All in all, they're very entertaining, very chilling, and will make you think twice about being alone in the dark. Number 7 is technically one of those classic villains I said I wouldn't use, but you only really know that if you know the spoilers. So I'm just going to proceed. The Winter King, from the Chronicles of the Imaginarium Geographica series by James A. Owen. He really only stars in the first book, Here There Be Dragons, but his influence carries over to the sequel, The Search for the Red Dragon. The series, The Chronicles of the Imaginarium Geographica, is basically an amalgamation of classic literature and mythology, and creates a world where mythical characters come to life, and people from about the 1920s, 1930s, wander around in a land filled with characters inspired by the Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Greek folktales, and more. The Winter King's identity is truly someone that's well known to most literary aficionados, but, well, we'll just keep that a secret. As he stands, the Winter King is a warrior bent on destruction and domination, and he employs several archetypal tropes of villainy: darkness, the ability to play with shadows, and the motif of winter. He is absolutely ruthless and will stop at nothing, including getting some of the protagonists to betray each other by accident. It all leads up to a final battle where the mythical realm's very existence is threatened, as is the line of King Arthur. In the sequel, Search for the Red Dragon, the Winter King's influence actually leads to more misunderstandings, more good people going bad, and a little bit of murder on the side. Now, the figure that is the Winter King does reappear much later in the series to have a more sympathetic side to him, which, admittedly, I'm a little divided about. I do like that he is given a more three-dimensional personality, but at the same time, when he does reappear, he's completely erased of the Winter King identity, and of all the villainous tropes that we come to know and love with him. So really, I just want my focus to be on this character's appearance as the Winter King in the first couple of books, and not as he appears later. Overall, though, he employs all of the best cliches in all of the best ways possible in a way that's only fitting for a story based on the stories and archetypes of old. Number 6 is actually multiple villains, but all from the same series, and they all have about the same amount of spotlight time. These are arguably the scariest villains on this list. The Witches, from the Wardstone Chronicles by Joseph Delaney. Actually, here in the United States, the books are known as The Last Apprentice, but goodness do I hate that title. The individual book titles are better, but the series title is just The Last Apprentice. Okay, I'm good. I'm not going to rant on this. Within the mythology of what I am heretofore going to refer to as the Wardstone Chronicles, witches come in 3 flavors: good, bad, and somewhere in the middle. Although this gets played with as the series goes on, and some of the bad witches have good qualities. Wardstone's villains play out in kind of a monster of the week sort of fashion, although as the series goes on, there are certain characters who reoccur, and one certain supernatural entity that becomes sort of the big bad. However, for a while, the witches are faced one by one, a new one appearing for every new story in the series. And some notable examples include Mother Malkin, who can stretch her body out to infect and possess the body of anyone she desires in order to disguise herself, and who is most famous for offering shelter to young and pregnant women only to murder them. Morwenna the Water Witch, who patrolled the swamps, and when she fixes upon your gaze with her red eye, you find yourself paralyzed until she comes upon you to kill you. And Lady Vermald, who is a stately woman of society that no one suspects is a witch, until she leads the devil resurrecting Walpurgisnacht ritual with all of the other evil witch clans in the county. My descriptions don't really do them justice, and to get the full potency of how intimidating each of these figures can be, you're probably going to want to refer to the original source material. Needless to say, they're all designed so uniquely that they leave a definite impression on at least my mind, and I would say the minds of most readers, and a fairly creepy impression too. And that is why, even though they're all one-shot villains that don't really get much character depth, I really do like them and rank them that high on my list. Number 5. We're getting in the big leagues now. Acheron Hades, from the Thursday Next series by Jasper Fforde. Though he really only appears in the first book, The Heir Affair, his legacy does carry on into the rest of the series, mostly by his younger sister Aornis picking up his mantle and becoming a longer recurring, but in my mind less compelling villain. Acheron Hades is known as one of the most notorious criminals in the mythos of the world that Fforde has created, and has done pretty much every crime under the sun, running basically a mafia. He has supernatural powers as well, allowing him not to be detected on security cameras as he steals whatever he wants. He's known to do horrible things to people, including something that I'll bring up a little later when I want to talk about his complex side, insofar as he has one. His goal is basically to mess with books kind of the way Capricorn did, by stealing an invention called the Prose Portal that transports people from the real world, well, the reality that Jasper Fforde has created, which is definitely an alternate universe, into the world of any book chosen. And he has big plans for what to do once there. He can't be easily killed by normal weapons, but is not afraid to get his hands very dirty when facing off against various protagonists. His invincibility and ruthlessness are what make him a very compelling figure by a villainous standard. However, he does have a little bit of complexity. One of his recurring, most disgusting deeds is capturing people and wiping their minds so that he can graft onto them the face of a favorite henchman he had who died. And whenever the new person given the face of this henchman dies, he repeats the process, showing that while he's mostly heartless, he does still care about something, even though that doesn't really affect how he chooses to treat the rest of the world. Number 4. This one has actually had a surge of popularity in recent years, and chances are more likely than not, you already know who she is. The Other Mother from Coraline by Neil Gaiman, given a surge in popularity when Coraline was adapted into what I'm going to say was not too shabby of a movie. The Other Mother is all about tricking people through their heart's desires. She creates worlds that they want to be in, where everything seems to be tailored to fit everything they want. Basically, little paradises. But these paradises are deeply flawed, and as our protagonist Coraline goes deeper and deeper, finding out that she has to sacrifice her own parents back in reality if she wants to stay in the Other Mother's paradise that she's created, she finds out that the Other Mother cannot, and this is basically a quote directly from Gaiman, she cannot create. She can only twist and change. And everything that she tries to twist and change comes out horribly wrong. Whether the two old ladies who run a theater in the basement turn out to be a horrible two-headed monster that sleeps in a cocoon on the wall, or even the man chosen to replace Coraline's own father is nothing more than a lump of clay that can reform itself into anything it sort of wants, as long as the Other Mother can give it a helping hand, and in the end devolves into little more than a monster, because the whole time it was only a pawn. The Other Mother, when her scheme is figured out, is not just foiled by such things as being outsmarted. She can also attack physically, and the last act of the entire book is Coraline escaping the realm that the Other Mother has created, victoriously, having rescued her parents and saved the souls of 3 other victims, only to find out that the Other Mother has dispensed with charades and is coming to attack Coraline directly, despite the fact that the door to that realm was seemingly closed, and Coraline has to find a way to put an end to the last remnant of this woman. Altogether, she makes for a very terrifying antagonist, but also a visualization of the concept in villainy that has fascinated many. The idea that people can get to you by giving you what you want, and that if you're not smart enough to see the consequences and realize there's no such thing as perfection, you can be exploited.